Good evening, Rowan. It's the 3rd of June 2016 and it's just after 8:30 in the evening, and I'm making this video quite early this evening because I thought it was going to show my plants off in the best light, but unfortunately I've had to put the blind down because the light from the window was showing them in the shadow. But I thought you'd like to see my plants because it's quite topical for this evening's video, where we're going to look at some biblical studies and environmentalism and other things. So I thought I could give you a little lesson in biblical studies, and all the people who listen to you and don't check the things out for themselves, who might think that what you're saying is actually true. Now, as I've said before, I'm not telling you that you have to believe anything. You can believe whatever you want. But what I'm concerned about is that you keep presenting things as if they were Christianity, where in fact they're something else entirely, and sometimes, well, often in fact, quite the opposite. And I've used the example recently of you saying that St. Paul was promoting collectivism. Well, this evening we're going to talk about environmentalism and the way that you misrepresent biblical texts to promote environmentalism, which you've done on many instances. But here's a video I haven't commented on before, but I thought I could give you a little bit of education in biblical studies, so that the next time you talk a load of crap you could at least try and base it on something that's actually true. I mean, it's a bit like you putting on a gas mask in Manhattan, in the financial district of New York. It's a highly implausible story, and your biblical exegesis is equally implausible. Now, I'm not telling you have to believe what the Bible says. You can believe whatever you want. I just wonder why it is that you're always misrepresenting what it says, and by complete coincidence, of course, the way that you represent it always promotes the environmentalist and the globalist agenda. The way that you misrepresent everything, all the lies that you tell, always promote the globalist agenda. You never tell any lies that go in another direction. So I suppose this is all an amazing coincidence, like all your clocks saying 9/11 and other such things, and you just happening to turn up in the same place wherever Al-Qaeda turn up as well. So I'm not going to talk anymore because the rest of the video is probably going to be quite long when I've finished it, but there will be some comments interspersing a lecture that you gave before the Copenhagen Climate Summit, which I haven't commented on before this video, but it is one of your masterpieces. If I use the word masterpiece in an ironical sense. So I'll leave it there, but obviously I'm reassuring you as well that I won't be seducing any priests over the weekend, or anyone else for that matter. So since you're such a good and virtuous and holy man and only care about my welfare, you'll be very pleased to hear that, won't you? So I'll leave it there for this evening, but you can look forward to some instruction on biblical exegesis and environmentalism. So have a nice weekend, and don't forget, be alert. Hasta la próxima.
don't want to talk about climate crisis as the first thing on the agenda, despite tonight's title. But don't leave just yet. I think, you see, that we're only going to be able to shape a robust and creative Christian response to this or any other of our current crises if we step back a bit and try to understand why so much of what's wrong has its roots in a shared cultural and spiritual crisis. And the nature of that crisis could be summed up rather dramatically by saying that it's a loss of a sense of what life is. I don't mean the meaning of life in the way we normally use that phrase. I mean a sense of life as a web of interactions, mutual givings and receivings that make up the world we inhabit. Seeing this more clearly helps us dismantle the strange fictions we create about ourselves as human beings. We are disconnected, and we need to be reintroduced to life. So, I'm going to outline some of the ways in which the Jewish and Christian traditions offer a way into this, not least through the remarkable story of Noah. I'm going to try and show how the biblical picture presents us with a humanity that can never be itself without taking on the care and protection of the life of which it's a part. And I want also to make some links to other aspects of our present situation that intensify the feeling of crisis, and to suggest how our responses to the climate crisis and other ecological challenges naturally feeds into our responses to the wider economic and social malaise as well. I'll have something to say about the practical steps we can all take in response to these things, but at the heart is the challenge to live with different images in our minds. The story of Noah is a great archetypal story, one to which we constantly return to learn something of the truth of our own situation and make better sense of it. So let's start with some of the familiar images from that story. If there's one thing most people still remember about Noah and the flood, it's that the ark was full of animals. Thanks to a variety of popular songs, including the children's cantata Captain Noah and His Floating Zoo, which we've probably all heard at primary school concerts, some of us many, many times, and thanks to plenty of picture books and cartoons, you're likely to think of Noah as surrounded by the animals who came in 2 by 2. Forgetting for a moment the complications of the biblical text, with its distinction between the 7 pairs of ritually clean animals and the single pair of unclean animals required, the story is clearly about how the saving of the human future is inseparable from securing a future for all living things. It's not just that Noah collects specimens of animal life. He collects breeding pairs. And when the floodwaters have subsided, they are famously told to go and multiply. Noah is made responsible for the continuation of what we would call an ecosystem. In all sorts of ways, the story in Genesis deliberately echoes the story of creation itself, using many of the same words and phrases. The creation stories of Genesis 1 and 2 see the creation of humanity as quite specifically the creation of an agent, a person, who can care for and protect the animal world, reflecting the care of God himself, who enjoys the goodness of what he's made. And with Noah, that care is expressed in terms of saving a future in which humanity and the animal world share the same space. In the words of the theologian Michael Northcott, quote, "In contrast to the prideful destruction visited on the earth by his violent neighbours, Noah submits patiently to the humble demands of caring for the many animals he intends to save from destruction. The image of Noah summoning the creatures to the ark may also be meant to recall God bringing the animals to Adam so that they can be named. Once on the scene, humanity has to establish its relationship with the animal world, a relationship in which meaning is given to the whole world of living things through the human reflection of God's sustaining care." I shan't labour the point, but reading Genesis as if it licensed the exploitation of the rest of creation is a major mistake. Nothing could be clearer in the biblical text than the belief that humanity is meaningless, seen independently of the world of diverse life forms in which it is embedded. The flood story ends with the making of a covenant, a binding treaty, not just between God and humanity, but between God and all living things. God is committed to life, to the continuance of life on earth. And whatever happens, he will not let life disappear. Although the focus in the story of the flood has been on animal life, it's clear that the horizon of the text extends much wider. The one thing we should not imagine is that God's covenant means that we have a blank check where the created world is concerned. The text points out that God's promise has immediate and specific implications about how we behave towards all living beings, human and non-human. It is not a recipe for complacency or passivity. Read in this way, the Bible seems to be saying that creation finds its focus in three things: the possibility of life, the transmission of life, and the interrelated diversity of life. So if we focus, as we can hardly help doing, on humanity as the supreme creative possibility, the form of life that reflects the love and intelligence of the Creator, this has important implications. The supreme possibility is to show something of the nature of God within creation, and the specialness of humanity turns out to lie in its role as protecting, through the exercise of that love and intelligence, life overall, not only human life. It is a crucial part, but still only a part, of the interdependence of all living things. So for humanity to be a point of focus in creation is not for it to be separate from the rest of creation, or to have solitary privileges and powers over creation. It is to realize that it is unimaginable without all those other life forms which make it possible, and which it in turn serves and conserves. And if that is the case, then respect for humanity, a proper ethical account of humanity, has to be bound up with respect for life itself in all its diversity.
reading the Bible correctly? Is it understanding what kind of text the Bible is? And I think the first couple of chapters of Genesis, again, tell us what we need to know. What is, exists because God invites it into being. From the very beginning, things have gone badly wrong with the human race. And God has not yet given up on us. Now that's quite a good start. But all of that seems to me obscured by getting into, ditches you ought not to be dying in, into the sort of trench warfare of creationism, intelligent design and so forth, trying to meet scientists on their own territory, when that's not actually what Genesis gives you the ammunition for.
Genesis tells us that when we are called to relationship with our Creator, we are in the same moment summoned to responsibility for the non-human world. That's how we express and activate our relationship with the Creator. Our reality as made in God's image. In this way, the Creator has joined together the sacredness of human life with that of life itself. There is no way in which we can grasp human dignity and value and treat it independently of human life's involvement with all other life, vegetable and animal, the variegated life of the rainforest, as well as the multiple species of pollinating bees, to take a rather timely example. We've seen growing evidence in recent years of a lack of correlation between economic prosperity and a sense of well-being, and evidence to suggest that inequality in society is one of the more reliable predictors of a lack of well-being. It looks very much as if what we need is to be reconnected rather urgently with the processes of our world. We shouldn't need an environmental crisis to establish that the developed world has become perilously out of touch with the experience of those living in the least developed parts of the world and with their profound vulnerabilities and insecurities. But it is the case that this crisis has focused, as few other things could, the real cost of illusion. The cost of the progression traced by Alistair McIntosh in the book I mentioned, perhaps in terms too dramatic for everyone's taste, the progression from pride to violence to ecocide. And this means that we have to ask whether our duty of care for life is compatible with assuming without question that the desirable future for every economy, even the most currently successful and expansionist, is unchecked growth. If the effect of unchecked growth is to isolate us more and more from life, from the complex interrelations that make us what we are as part of the whole web of existence on the planet, then we cannot continue to grow indefinitely in economic terms without moving towards the death of what is distinctively human, the death of the habits that make sense in a shared world, where life has to be sustained by cooperation not only between humans, but between humans and their material world. But the question more and more people are asking is whether there are macroeconomic models that would allow us to see investment in public infrastructures and the development of sustainable technologies as priorities for a healthy economy, rather than a simple growth in consumer power. The recent report, Prosperity Without Growth, from the Sustainable Development Commission, outlines what sort of areas would need to be rethought if we took such an approach, and tried to balance the need for a stable and productive economy with the need for investment directed towards, I quote from the report, resource productivity, renewable energy, clean technology, green business, climate adaptation, and ecosystem maintenance and protection. It would mean revising a lot of assumptions about the time scale and character of profit and about the balance of private and public good. But without some such rethinking of our current obsession with growth in consumerist terms, we can be sure of two things. Inequality will not be addressed, and so the powerlessness of the majority of the world's population will remain as it is at the moment, and the dehumanizing effects of the culture of consumer growth will worsen. Only if we start thinking along these lines can we see our way through the difficulties often referred to about holding together the imperative of environmental care and the imperative of economic development. And last, and anything but least, there is what each of us can do to reconnect with reality, as I put it earlier. There are the various specific choices we can make about our refuse, our travel, our domestic energy use, all fairly familiar by now. And once again, there are resources available for more detailed proposals. But I'd also want to underline the need for us to change our habits enough to make us more aware of the diversity of life around us. I once suggested that one necessary contribution to a better awareness of these issues was to make sure we went out of doors in the wet from time to time. A suitable lesson from Noah, of course. And if we haven't got gardens of our own, make sure we took opportunities of watching the changing of the seasons on the Earth's surface. This may seem trivial compared with the high drama of saving the world, but if this analysis is correct, our underlying problem is being dissociated, and we ought to be asking constantly how we restore a sense of association with the material place and time and climate that we inhabit and that we are part of. The Christian story lays out a model of reconnection with an alienated world. It tells us of a material human life inhabited by God and raised transfigured from death, of a sharing of material food which makes us sharers in eternal life, of a community whose life together seeks to express within creation the care of the Creator. In words used by both Moses and St. Paul, this is not a message remote from us in heaven or buried under the earth. It is near, on our lips and in our hearts. And as Moses immediately goes on to say in the Old Testament passage, you know it and can quote it, so now obey it. Today I am giving you a choice between good and evil, between life and death. Choose life.